Purity was young when her mother took her away to live in the city with her uncle Mr. Emmanuel the night before traveling to the city to meet Uncle Emmanuel. Purity's mother told her to be obedient to her uncle. Make sure you listening to your uncle. Her mother said he is a good man and always be respectful towards your elders like I have taught you, and do whatever your uncle tells you to do because he's wise. Purity's mother said then she began to arrange Purity's luggage for the long journey to Uncle Emmanuel's house. Very early the next morning, Uncle Emmanuel drove into the compound. Purity was already prepared and waiting for her uncle to come take her to the city. Purity happily took her bags in the car and sat down in the car happily while the car engine started. Purity's mother was a little sad. The city was far from the town, which was going to make it impossible to see her daughter anytime soon. Please take care, my daughter, and don't forget everything that have taught you, Purity's mother said while waving at Purity. Uncle Emmanuel drove faster to the city. The journey to the city was long and fun. Purity enjoyed watching all the tall buildings and the beauty of the city. She was amazed by all the sights and sounds of the city. Uncle Emmanuel noticed her amazement and smiled. You will get used to the city life soon, he said. They finally arrived at Uncle Emmanuel's house in the city. Was so shocked to see the big mansion her uncle was living in. When they got inside, Purity was giving some food to eat. She sat in the dining table enjoying her gel fries and juice. Mr. Emmanuel was a successful businessman. He has a wife and 2 children who lived with him in the city, but Uncle Emmanuel's wife was a traveler. She always travels from one city to another, sometimes visiting twice in a month. As Purity settles in her new life, she began to notice her uncle's behavior towards her was changing. He would often find excuses to touch her and make her feel uncomfortable. At first, Purity thought that maybe her uncle was being overly affectionate, but as the incident continued, Purity realized that something was wrong. She felt trapped and scared and didn't know what to turn to. One day, as Purity was playing with her uncle's children, she heard her uncle scream her name, so she went to answer him. Emmanuel was inside his room. It was Saturday, so he stayed at home as he doesn't work on Saturdays. He was inside his room watching a video on a television. The video was an adult video which was improper for a young girl like Emmanuel. Purity got into the room and saw her uncle watching the television. Uncle Emmanuel stared at her for some seconds. He noticed that she was wearing a very attractive dress. He told her to go get a glass of water for him. Purity rushed to go get the glass of water. When she left the room, Emmanuel began to have bad thoughts about his niece. He got influenced by the movie he was watching, so he wanted to do exactly what he saw in the movie with his niece, seeing that his wife was never around because of her kind of business, so he felt lonely. Purity returned to her uncle's room with a glass of water. Emmanuel collected the glass of water and kept it on a small table beside his bed. Then he stood up and locked the door. As a young girl, Purity was confused as to why her uncle was locking the room. He looked at her face anxiously and asked Purity, "I need something from you." Purity asked him what he wanted. "I want you to give me what my wife hardly does." Was confused as she didn't know what her uncle was talking about. She thought about it but couldn't figure it out. Uncle Emmanuel proceeded by placing his hands on Purity's shoulder. He rubbed her softly at her shoulder. He tried to bring his hand down to where he was not supposed to touch, but Purity quickly removed his hands from her body. "Uncle, my mother told me not to allow anyone to touch me there," Purity said. Looking at her uncle, she was scared but didn't know what to do. Her uncle was already into her. He wanted to take advantage of the opportunity. Purity, "Remember, your mother told you to do everything I say. That's because she know that I can't hurt you. Just let me touch it now," Uncle Emmanuel said with a soft voice. Purity thought for a while and remembered that her mother told her not to disrespect her uncle. Then she allowed her uncle to touch her exactly where he wanted to. As a young girl, she didn't quite understand what her uncle was doing. She has not experienced that before. At that point, Uncle Emmanuel proceeded even further. When she couldn't take it anymore, she told her uncle to stop, but her uncle didn't listen, but he proceeded even more further. She tried removing herself from the situation, but she couldn't. She cried and cried, but no one could come to her aid. Meanwhile, Emmanuel's children were in the living room playing. They were waiting for Purity to come back. But what they didn't know was that Purity was going through a terrible ordeal. They heard her scream as if she was in trouble. One of Mr. Emmanuel's children decided to go check what was happening. As he walked towards Purity's voice, he realized that the cry was coming from her father's bedroom. The little boy was wondering about what was happening in the room. He tried to open the door, but it was locked. Mr. Emmanuel quickly noticed that someone was standing at the door. He heard his son's voice and opened the door, pretending like nothing happened. His son John walked in anxiously. and asked his father what was wrong with Purity. I heard her crying. What is wrong with her? John asked. Don't worry son. Purity fell white, getting me a glass of water, so I was attending to her, but she'll be fine. Emmanuel replied to his son. Purity knew that her uncle was lying. She couldn't speak out because her uncle told her to be silent. She was sad and angry. It was a day she will never forget in her life. That night Purity sat on her bed crying. Her uncle noticed that she was still sad and went up to her. Stop crying Purity, you're almost a woman now, you will get used to it uncle. Emmanuel said. Purity was confused and didn't know what to do. She said to her uncle, uncle please don't do that to me again, it hurts. Emmanuel smiled and said, Purity, it's just a play between me and you, don't worry, next time we will play a different kind of game. Emmanuel convinced her. He brought out a sen and gave it to her as a gift. Purity accepted the gift, which made her smile a bit. He informed her that her mother would be visiting the next day and warned her not to tell her mother anything or she won't be getting snacks and gifts from him anymore. No, I want you to get me more snacks than gifts. I won't tell my mom, Purity said. Purity was confused and didn't know what to do, and she didn't want to disobey her uncle. As night went on, Purity couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about what her uncle did to her. She didn't know what to confine him, but she needed to do something. The next day Purity's mother arrived in the city. Purity was excited seeing her mother, but she was also nervous about what had happened with her uncle. As they sat down to eat, her mother asked her how she was faring. Purity wanted to tell her mother everything, but she was scared. I'm fine mommy, Purity said, trying to hide her pain. Her mother looked at her closely, sensing that something was wrong. Are you okay? Her mother asked again. Purity looked at her, unsure of what to say. Just then Emmanuel walked in, smiling, pretending to be a good man. Purity's mother thanked him for taking care of her daughter. Emmanuel smiled, telling her not to worry as he will continue to take good care of her and arrange a new school for her. Purity's mother was happy that Emmanuel will enroll her daughter in a good school as she can't afford to send her daughter to school. That's one of the reasons she had brought her to stay with her brother. Purity's mother stayed with them for 2 weeks. Emmanuel couldn't carry out his huge plans with Purity because her mother was around. He couldn't take the risk. When it was time for Purity's mother to go back, Emmanuel gave her a lot of food items and some money. She thanked him and waved her daughter goodbye. Mr. Emmanuel was now ready to continue with his evil deeds. As Purity was cleaning the house, she heard her uncle call out her name. She became scared again. She knew her uncle wanted to make her uncomfortable again. As she stood in the living room, she couldn't run or say no. She had no other choice. She then walked to her uncle's room. As she opened the door, her heart raced as she stood at the entrance of the room. Purity, I have plenty of snacks for you. Come, let's play our usual game and I give you a lot of them. But uncle, the game is very painful and it makes me uncomfortable. But Uncle Emmanuel continued to convince her, telling her that it was just a game, and again Purity fell for his tricks. But this time he heard a knock on the door, but it wasn't his kids, it was from his wife. Honey, it's me, open the door, I'm back, his wife shouted while trying to open the door, but it was locked. She wondered why her husband would lock the door. As soon as Purity heard the voice, her face lit up with joy. She felt a surge of hope, knowing that someone had arrived to rescue her from her troubled situation. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the story. If so, please like the video, comment what you have learned from the tale, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more enchanting tales just like this one. See you on the next one. Thank you and God bless. Bye.